Hi everybody, it's great to be back here again. Tomorrow's Friday. Let's get down to our Torah lesson. This week's portion is called Parashat Bishalach. And we're excited, of course, that we have left Egypt already. Now the tension is building as we're ready to cross over the Red Sea. And of course, sing the song of Shirat Hayam. Az Yashem Moshe V'nei Yisrael. Then sang Moshe Rabbeinu and the children of Israel, Tashir Hazot, this song. But before we again get to the story of the song and crossing over Egypt, crossing over the Red Sea, of course, that is a beautiful and amazing portion as well. But this week I want to focus on a different area. I want to begin by saying it's a custom. Every day when we get up in the morning and we pray, after the prayer is over, we have 6 things that we have to remind ourselves, to remember. 6 things we say every day. It's great events that took place in the history of Israel. And one of them is the Exodus. It's very interesting. The Exodus stands out as one of the things we must remember every day. As a matter of fact, it's brought down in Jewish law, the Rambam, in the laws of Shema. You know, saying Shema Yisrael. We cover our eyes. We say the Lord is one. We have to remember not only doing the take upon ourselves the yoke of heaven, but connecting it according to the Rambam, Maimonides, with leaving Egypt. We have to remember every day leaving Egypt. And the question is if it's enough during the day or we have to remember at night as well. And the Rambam goes on to say that we have to remember at night. So when we say Shema Yisrael at night, we also have to read 3 portions of the Torah. And one of them, again, mentions the leaving Egypt. It's called Parashat Tzitzit, the portion that deals with the commandment of Tzitzit, right? We mentioned leaving Egypt. So therefore, again, the Rambam rules that. So we have to say, remember Egypt in the morning and the evening. So not only when we get up in the morning, we pray, we say it again in Shema, we say it in the evening time. But it's interesting, where's the source of the Rambam Maimonides ruling? And the source is in a tractate of Brachot. There's a very interesting discourse between Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah and the rabbis. And it's focused on a verse which says, "Leman tiskor yom seitcha me'eretz mitzrayim kol yemei chayecha," so that you shall remember leaving Egypt your entire life, kol yemei chayecha, all the days of your life. And the word "all," again, those who study Talmud and study Midrash know that a certain word, every word can mean a mountain. It can mean a huge difference in study. And here the word "all" is superfluous. Could have said yemei chayecha, the days of your life. Why does it say all the days of your life? In Hebrew, the word is kol. Very sounds like all. Kol in Hebrew, we know, is the source of all languages. They all came from Hebrew. So that's why it's very similar. But anyway, what do we learn from that word? So, Ben Zoma, one of the great sages, Rabbi Elazar learned from him that he learns Kol Yemecha comes to add another thing. Not only Yemecha, the days of your life, but also in the evening time. You have the commandment of studying of Egypt, about Egypt, remembering Egypt. Leaving Egypt, the Exodus. And the rabbis give an interesting opinion as well. Kol Yemei Chayecha comes to teach us not that in the evening time, but in the time where we may forget that God took us out of Egypt. What is a time like that? He says in the time when the Messiah comes, during the period of the Messianic period, where there will be great events taking place in the world, and Jews will be leaving many, many countries. We call the ingathering of the exiles. Like we see in our time, we're in that time. So sometimes people can forget. Like today, we're talking about leaving the Iron Curtain falling down and Jews making Aliyah coming out of Europe after the Holocaust and moving to Israel. And we're talking about all the time. We're really talking about, the formation of the state of Israel again, which is we're in Messianic times today. So here, not to forget, although we have to focus on amazing events and new events that take place, we're told not to forget what took place in the past. And we must always remember leaving Egypt. And therefore, according to this opinion of the rabbis, that's what we learn from the superfluous word, your entire life, even in the times where you may forget. Even in the times you may forget the great event of leaving Egypt, which is a very interesting discussion. And the Rambam brings it to law. Actually, he applies it by saying we must, as we said before, you must remember in the day and the night. And the question is, also, it's very interesting, this goes on even beyond this, is if we look as Jews in our holidays, every one of our holidays, every time, first of all, we make Kiddush. we have to say we mention leaving Egypt. At night when we open the wine, we make our kiddush, or of course on Shabbat, holidays. Every time we mention Zecher Yetziat Mitzrayim, remembering our leaving exile. And of course we have a holiday called Passover, which is totally focused on leaving Egypt. And we have the holiday of Sukkot, which also talks about leaving Egypt. And everything is really centered around our leaving Egypt, if that's not enough. So the question is, why is it such a tremendous, everything we do, we wear our tzitziot, as mentioned before, the commandment of wearing tzitziot, right now, 4 common garment, these things right here, they remind us of also leaving Egypt. And when we get tefillin in the morning, it reminds us of Egypt. We're so surrounded constantly, every day waking up, and here we are, thousands of years later, and we still have to think about, remember leaving Egypt. Why can't we talk about leaving America and moving to Israel? Or leaving other places of the world and Jews coming home? Of course we can, but we have to always remember leaving Egypt. What is the reason behind this? And in order to understand this concept, to develop it a little bit more, I'll add, I guess, one more level. Another level is that remembering Egypt, according to the Rambam, would be in the morning and the evening during our recitation of Shema. But there are other opinions as well. That's not only in the morning and the evening, but a person could do it throughout the day. Think about Egypt, or of course, here we are studying the portions of Egypt. So by studying these portions of Egypt, of course, and coming out of Egypt, the Exodus, we are fulfilling that mitzvah, of course, very, very well. With that introduction, now I can say, wow, now we see how important it is to study these portions, because we are fulfilling a special mitzvah of remembering. We have to know why. Why is it so important to remember? I'd like to try to touch upon this in this week's lesson, if God willing, time allows. So first of all, the portion opens up with Vayhi Bishalach Paro, when Paro sent out the nation of Israel, and God took them a roundabout way. They could have, as a matter of fact, entered, if you know where Egypt is located, in the southern part of Israel. They could have left Egypt, which borders on the west, near the borderline of the Gaza area. They could have gone right through Gaza, right, and come right, we call the Plishtim, Eretz HaPlishtim, and enter the west coast line of Israel. That area would have been much faster. But God said, no, we have to take them a roundabout way. We know why. They would have sought a war, and they would have wanted to go back to Egypt. And then it says something very interesting. It says in verse number, we're in chapter right now, for those who want to know, chapter 13. And if we look into verse number 18, it says again, when God took them through the desert, through the Red Sea. And then it says something, V'chamushim alu b'nei Yisrael me'eretz Mitzrayim. And the Jewish people left Egypt, chamushim. What does chamushim mean? Interesting. But if we look in our commentaries, we find that there are different interpretations of what the word chamushim means. Now, those of you who are studying Hebrew, how do you count? Echad is 1, Shtayim is 2, Shalosh is 3, Alba is 4. How do we say 5? Chamesh, chamushim. So it has something to do with 5. Chamushim comes from the takeoff of the word, the root of the word in Hebrew. Everything goes by roots, from the word chamesh, 5, chamushim. So what does it mean, chamushim? A lot of commentaries explain armed. When the Jewish people left Egypt, they left armed. They had 5 different, now what is the word 5? 5 refers to 5 different kinds of weapons: a sword, a spear, with a bow and arrow, whatever. 5 different kinds of weapons. If you read my essay, I brought it down that there are 5 types. That's one explanation. And it's brought down that they left chamushim, and we know to this very day, in Hebrew, modern Hebrew, we use the same word. Chamush, he's armed. That's the way we use it. But there are other explanations that explain the word chamushim in a different light. If we look regarding Joseph, when Joseph, of course, was in prison, and coming out of prison right away after the Paro had those dreams, and he had to give his advice, and he was asked to interpret those dreams, Joseph says, well, I don't know if I'm going to run and start finding all the portions, but Joseph, mentions like this. He says to Paro that you must prepare yourselves, right? And how does he say it? If you look in Genesis 41, okay, I'm going there. I don't want to open up all the verses, but we will open this one up. It says, Vatan, in verse number 33, so it's Genesis 41:33, says, Vata yere paro ish navon v'chacham. Let Paro see a wise person and place him upon Egypt. He's talking about having someone who's able to manage the years of bounty and the years of famine. And then he says, the Ikbitsu, and he uses the word, and look very carefully at the word, he says they should gather up, again, the grains, etc., in the warehouses. And then he uses the word, the chimesh. Chimesh literally means to, in verse number 34, it means chimesh at Mitzrayim. He has to provide for, or make the preparations of getting Egypt ready with all the bounty necessary. Right? During those bountiful years, chimesh at Mitzrayim, in order to prepare themselves for the difficult years, the years of famine. Now, some people explain chimesh again as the takeoff of the word 5, so 1/5 of the produce they would put away, and the rest they were able to sell, whatever it was. 1/5 the king would put again in his warehouses. There are different explanations what the word again chimesh means, but in all explanations, it has to do with making things, getting ready for the difficult years that were to come. So that's an important thing to mention over there. Now, with that explanation, the chamushim alu b'nei Yisrael Mitzrayim, when the Jewish people left chamushim, it doesn't mean armed necessarily, only armed, but it means that they had all the preparations. So certain, this is what Rashi explains. He talks about them being armed, but he adds, according to the Onkelos, that they had all the necessary things they needed when they, all the provisions necessary when they left Egypt. If you look in the Ibn Ezra, he questions that, and he explains it only as being armed. And then there are other explanations as well. Chamushim could mean 5 different types of groups of people left Egypt, like converts and slaves, different kind of groups. It's like 5 social groups. Again, a play from the word 5. So we mentioned so far the viewpoint of being armed, the viewpoint of making themselves ready, or it could be taken off on the fact that we had 5 different groups of people. And there's also an explanation that talks about it's a fraction of multiples of 5. 1/5 left the land, 1/50th, 1/500th. The European opinion is 1 out of 5,000 left. A lot of people in the 3 days of darkness died in Egypt, and a lot of Jews didn't make it out of the country. So here again, we see that there are different explanations how to explain the chamushim alu b'nei Yisrael Mitzrayim. And so one person may ask, and there are others as well. Some people say it was the 5th generation. I'm not going to get there. Different explanations regarding what does it mean. But the point I'm trying to focus on here now is to realize that each of these different explanations are fulfilling the mitzvah, the commandment of remembering Egypt, because they're all right. There's not one right answer, because they all could be right, and teaching us different angles of what it was to coming out of Egypt. What did it mean? And I want to add another side to the chamushim alu b'nei Yisrael Mitzrayim. The Jewish people left armed, but I want to explain it in a different way. Because if we see right away, and armed of course, but the question is armed with what? If we look in the next verse, it talks about Moshe Rabbeinu. What does Moshe Rabbeinu do? Moshe says, Vayikach Moshe atzmot Yosef. Moshe Rabbeinu took the bones of Joseph with him. Ki ashbei yishbir b'nei Yisrael emo pakod yifkod Elohim etchem, v'alitem et atzmotai mizeh itchem. Moshe Rabbeinu takes the bones of Joseph, and he reminds us of the oath that Joseph made his brothers take when he left the land of Egypt. I mean, when they will leave the land of Egypt, to take his bones and bury them in Israel. So the question here, of course, is, what does this Torah want to teach us? That after everyone is taking, leaving Egypt and with all the bounty and getting ready, making preparations, and Moshe Rabbeinu is dealing with something else. He takes upon himself the commandment of fulfilling the oath of Joseph, which was a mitzvah in itself. That's what really he's concerned with more than anything else. He's not concerned with the bounty and with all the other things that people want to take out of Egypt. But he wants to take out of Egypt Joseph's bones. Fulfilling the oath of Joseph, of course, he has to do them to fulfill the mitzvah. And obviously, it's something very, very deep, the connection of Moshe Rabbeinu with Joseph, that he has to deal with this whole situation. But in order to understand this even more, I want to talk about a beautiful midrash that is brought down that talks about a very, very special lady in the Bible. As a matter of fact, she's mentioned twice in the 5 books of the Torah. Her name is Serach bat Asher, the daughter of the father of the tribe, Asher. Their tribal portion was located from the Carmel Mountains on the coast of Israel all the way to Lebanon. We call in Hebrew Sidon in Lebanon. And that's where the tribal portion was. And Asher had a daughter named Serach bat Asher. Serach was her name. Now, the name Serach is very interesting. The fact that the name itself means to be a leftover, a remnant. Serach is something it's mentioned in regards to the tabernacle. When the curtains of the tabernacle had odef, they had it left over. That's Serach. It also could mean different things. We're going to talk about that in a moment because I want to connect it to the whole we're talking about over here and wrap things in here. Serach was very unusual that she was mentioned when the Jewish people came down to Egypt with Jacob and the family. She was counted within the 70 people that made it to Egypt. And it's very unusual for a woman to be counted because they're all men except Serach. She's the only one that was counted and considered part of that 70, the number 70, which again makes her very distinguished and unusual. And I mentioned before, she's mentioned 2 times. That's one time she's mentioned in the 5 books. And there she's brought down again in the book of Genesis. And we find her in the book of Numbers as well, when the consensus is given. After the story of Korach, swallowing up, and the consensus is taken again, and we see her mentioned many years later, over 210 years later, obviously. So she's lived a very, very long life. It's been over a couple hundred years when she's mentioned again in the Bible. And here we see, those are the 2 times she's really mentioned. And she's always mentioned as the daughter of Asher. We don't see any really outright activity, what she has done. But what stands out is she's mentioned twice, which is very unusual. As a woman, she's the only granddaughter of Jacob mentioned. And why is she mentioned there? In the book of Chronicles, she's also mentioned there, as a matter of fact. But the question is why? In addition, we see there are similar names in the Bible. The same name mentioned a couple of times. It's mentioned, I mentioned before, in regards to the tabernacle. The name Serach is mentioned within the tabernacle, within the tents, hinting to a woman connected to the tent, a woman's place, of course. So he said, he called Kvoda bat Melech Pnima, a woman is a very, very powerful. She's the queen of her home. The tent is the house. And in addition, besides the fact that she's connected to the word Serach, we see in the book of Joshua that Joshua inherited a portion of land in the tribal portion of Ephraim. He was from the tribe of Ephraim. And also, the name of his city was called Timnat Serach. That's the name of his city. It was the same exact name as hers, as Serach. Of course, the difference in spelling, it can be spelled with a shin, with a sin, or with a samach. But still, in Hebrew, they're interchangeable. And as a matter of fact, we see in the rabbinic literature that they interchange the spelling of Serach. So anyway, the question is, we see there are hints here. But again, she's not actively doing anything in the Bible, but being mentioned. And therefore, I think something very, very special and powerful about this individual, her silence is so powerful. Sometimes not saying anything, you feel the energy of this person and how powerful that person is. And as a matter of fact, her name, if you take the name Serach in Hebrew, you reverse the letters, it means cheresh, meaning someone who can't hear, right? Deaf. So sometimes a person, it refers to silence. The silence could be so powerful. Silence is deadly sometimes, right? So powerful, there's so much going on in there. And we don't know until they open their mouth and begin to speak and reveal to us what's behind that silence. So that silence is really hinted within this whole character of Serach. Now, I want to bring in that old son Serach over here because Moshe Rabbeinu wants to take upon himself this mission of taking the bones of Joseph out of Egypt. So he has to get a hold of the bones. And where are the bones located? So Moshe Rabbeinu turns to Serach. Now why? We mentioned before, she lived a very, very long life. She lived in the generation of coming to Egypt, and she obviously knew more than anyone where was Joseph placed, because she was way back in Joseph's time. And she reveals, Moshe Rabbeinu comes over to her and asks her, where are the buried the bones of Joseph? She tells him they're in the Nile River in a casket of metal. And then Moshe Rabbeinu goes over to the Nile River and he says, Joseph, and we're here to fill the oath. It's time to get out of Egypt. And then whatever it is, the casket floats to the top of the river and he gets the bones. But the question is, of course, what I want to focus today is more on Serach, this amazing individual. Why does Moshe Rabbeinu go over to her? So, okay, she's from the other generation, she knows, but obviously there was even much more to it than that. There was some special connection between Serach and Joseph. And Serach, and I mentioned before, the fact that she's buried in, the fact that the name of Joshua of his town that he's buried in is Serach. That's the name of the place. So it's connected to Joseph. She's connected to this whole area. And this we see way back when Joseph was sold to Egypt. It was, our rabbis teach us that Serach was the one who was constantly praying, singing that Od Yosef Chai, Joseph is still alive, he never died. And he has two sons, Ephraim and Manasseh. And she's the one who revealed this to Jacob, that Joseph is alive. So she always saw the life and prayed for Joseph to survive and to prevail. So Joseph was always so powerful in her heart. She had a personal connection to Joseph. And it is known that there's a secret of redemption. The secret of redemption was marked by two words. You will surely remember, pakod pakadati. God says, again, I will remember you. And it's mentioned in two words. This double words is a secret that Jacob received from Abraham and Isaac, and he passed it down to his son Joseph. Out of all the sons, Joseph received this secret of knowing that the secret of redemption is pakod pakadati. And the other sons did not know it yet. Joseph, we see at the end of the book of Genesis, you can look in Genesis 50, and I'll bring down the verse. There we see itself at the end of Genesis 50, in Parashat Vayechi. Joseph says right out to his, if we look in chapter 50, verse number 24, Vayomi Yosef el Achab, and Joseph says to his brothers, Anochi met, I'm going to pass away. Velohim, and God, pakod yifkod etchem. He will surely remember you. Pakod yifkod, it's a double, remember. But so it's translated in English, we saw surely remember. But it really means pakod, he will double remembering. God will surely remember you. And Joseph here reveals to his brothers these two secret code words of redemption. Pakod pakadati. God will surely redeem you. What does this all mean? Joseph later on, when he passes away, as I mentioned before, every one of these sons received this, and Asher reveals this secret to Serach. She receives the secret of Pakod Pakadi, which means they know that the sign of these code words of redemption is God will remember us doubly. And what does it mean? When the Redeemer comes along and he says those words, Pakod Pakadati, then we know that he's a true Redeemer. And here we see in this week's portion regarding Moshe Rabbeinu, Moses, it says the same exact words in verse number 19. So if we look in chapter 13, verse number 19 again, it says, Vayikach Moshe at Motzu Yosef, et atzmot Yosef imo, and he takes the bones of Joseph. Ki ashbe ishbi et bnei Yisrael imo pakod yifkod etchem, v'alitem et atzmotai mizeh etchem. He goes, God will surely remember you. He reminds us about the oath with Joseph. So Moshe Rabbeinu, and this is mentioned again another place, that Moshe Rabbeinu's, the words Pakod Bakad, they knew that secret code, and therefore it was clear that he was the Redeemer. This Serach Bat Asher, who was the remnant of that generation, and she knew this code. She was the only one who bore the code. She heard Moshe Rabbeinu, and she knew that he, for sure, was a true Redeemer, and she was the one who assisted him to get the bones of Joseph out of the Nile River. Now, it's an amazing, of course, and we see how great this individual was as well. There's a lot more. Our rabbis tell us that Serach Bat Asher never died. She went to heaven straight to the Garden of Eden of her greatness. It says when under the blessing that the tribe of Asher receives, Baruch Banim Asher. Asher is blessed from sons. Now the question is, there's different explanations, but one explanation I thought of could be Baruch Banim. He is blessed from more than sons, which means he has an amazing daughter that is worth so, as how do we say, as a prize, as a parent who merits in having a child that's so special. It's a prize greater. So the Torah is saying, you had his amazing daughter, Serach. She's part of the redemption process. She's passing the code down. She's helping in redemption. She's worth more than sons to you. So that's an expression that could also be a possible explanation. And putting all this aside, I want to wrap things up together. We spoke about remembering. We see here that there's a double term, pakod pakadati, of remembering. And also we opened up the lesson talking about the importance of remembering leaving Egypt. And why is it so important? Why do you have to remember for? And this is really the answer. The answer is by us remembering, by us looking back and seeing what Hashem has done for us, we're fulfilling something we say, not taking something, just for what's the word I'm trying to use? To show our gratitude, to appreciate. And a lot of times we ask ourselves in life, how many people have done things for us in our lifetime and we've never really thanked them enough? We never really appreciate what they did for us. And of course, it all begins with our parents. Our parents are really there to teach us what it's like to appreciate, because God wants us to appreciate those who raised us and who gave us life and brought us into this world. And that brings us, of course, in a way closer to Hashem, to realize, wait a second, who brought our parents into the world? Who's sustaining all of us? Who gave us life? Who took us out of Egypt? So everything that we're discussing here has to do with remembering is appreciation. That's what we remember. Remember what we've been. Remember the trials and tribulations in our life, what we've gone through, and where and how we have to be so grateful and happy for Hashem for giving us life and saving us and helping us. So this is really a lesson of remembering. That's what remembering is all about, to appreciate it. And it's so easy for a person to be caught up in something else and not appreciate it. And that's really what it says, Chamushim, the Jewish people left armed. There were those involved in the bounty of Egypt and involved in all kinds of things that they were forgetting about the most important thing. Remembering where we came from, remembering that we're part of a chain and what our ancestors have done in order to bring us to this very, very point. And Moshe Rabbeinu was teaching us that lesson. He wasn't concerned with the money and all those other things. He was concerned with one thing, remembering who Joseph was. Because Joseph was the link, this vital link, who represents the foundation of the people of Israel. As we know, I'm not going to get into the Kabbalistic side, but foundation refers to bringing the bounty. Joseph is bounty. And without Joseph, without that important element of Joseph, we will have none of this bounty we would have. We would lack all this bounty. We wouldn't have this bounty. It's Joseph's blessing. And this is what Serach was able to see. And this is what Moshe Rabbeinu, of course, knew that it was vital for our redemption. He wanted to show that here we're dragging this casket of bones out of the Nile River and then schlepping it, bringing it along for 40 years in the desert. What do we have to work so hard for? Carrying bones, but that's exactly the lesson. It's so important for us at the burial places of our ancestors, just like the tomb of the patriarchs and the tomb of Joseph. We continue this, always connecting and remembering our forefathers and ancestors for what they have done and the role they played in bringing us to where we are. And then we can look forward for the new events of redemption and say, in their merit, we are here and we're being redeemed. We will not forget them, and of course, we will not forget the Creator who took us out of Egypt. And therefore, Hashem wants us every day when we pray, and every day when we say, Shema Yisrael, we're uniting to the oneness of God, to remember the greatness of the Creator of the world and of those ancestors of ours that have helped us and brought us to where we are today. Every day of our lives, we cannot go to sleep. We cannot wake up without thinking about those who have been there for us. This lesson is a powerful lesson. There's so much more to focus. And this, of course, if we had more time, and also Joshua itself. Joshua fulfills, he continues, he's from Ephraim, and he fulfills burying Joseph's bones in the city of Shechem. So he's continuing that line. And he's buried in Timnat Cheres, or Serach. He's buried in the city of Serach, connecting to the whole story we spoke about beforehand. And all this is to remember. Pakod pakadati, I will surely remember you. And just to finish with a note, we know that God gives back measure for measure. So therefore, by us constantly being involved in remembering our ancestors and never forgetting them, God will bless us and remember us and bring us redemption, and will bring us the final redemption that we await every single day, and we're working hard to, of course, to bring about. And it all, of course, is connected to this beautiful, beautiful message of what it is to appreciate and what it is to remember. So remember, we will be back, God willing, next week. Shabbat Shalom, Besorot Avot, Yeshuot, V'Nechamot.